agroecology is taking into account ecological process and ecosystems. And if you think of it, terrestrial ecosystems are the soils. This is where things happen. This is where a tremendous diversity of organisms, 1/4 of all known organisms, are living, making a tremendous diversity of activities such as mineralization of the organic matter, nitrogen fixation, dissolving the rocks, performing anaerobic respirations like denitrification, or even playing with the redox state of the iron and so on. So there is a diversity that we cannot imagine from the surface. And this is where things are happening in terrestrial ecosystems. This is the core of terrestrial ecosystems. So taking into account ecology and ecosystems where the production, the agricultural production is done, cannot be done without the soil. We sometimes struggle to realize that because soil is not translucent, and those microbes I mentioned, or many of the particles of the soil, such as clays and silts, are not visible by eyes. But we are really, us, animals walking at the surface of the soil, living at the periphery of terrestrial ecosystems. They are underground. This is what has to be taken into account. We face many different threats, and I think that one big one is erosion. By plowing, we improve erosion by a 10 to 100 factor. It's well known, so we have to stop plowing in many regions. We have to plow less, or even not to plow, because erosion is a big issue. By the way, erosion is amplified by the fact that due to the aeration of soil by plowing and increased respiration of soil, we have less organic matter. And that's another problem. We have less organic matter. We store less carbon because of that. That's another problem. We can also mention diffuse pollution, such as those by microplastics. And more specifically, coming back to practice, we have the problem that very often when you are irrigating without draining, you tend to have an accumulation of salt. So we have starting steps to salinization. We also have a problem with heavy metals, and we have to be aware that when we put phosphates extracted from mines, this contains cadmium, for example. So we are facing an increase in heavy metals in some soils, especially when we fertilize. It's going slow, but it's a trend. And finally, I think we also have a problem with artificialization. We have a problem with artificialization in France, for example, the equivalent of one department, and we have only less than 100 departments in France, okay? The equivalent of a department is covered by city extension, road extension, railways extension every 10 years. That's a drama, because this is happening around the cities that are situated in very, very fertile zones, and we are simply covering the soils with our installations. So there are many threats, and we have to be aware now that we have a limited amount of soil, and the quality of soil with heavy metals or microplastics, for example, cannot be improved. So we have to stop doing that and try to find out some ways of protecting them. Well, for the future, I think we need several things. We need a research that will allow us, and a research deeply linked with what you produce and the region where you produce it, to escape from too many times of plowing, if not from plowing. We also have to escape as much as we can away from pesticides. And I think that we cannot go on ignoring that glyphosate, for example, is killing the worms of the soil and the mycorrhizal fungi, that is the fungi that are helping the plants to get their food. So we have to do the research that will allow us to minimize plowing, pesticides of any kind. And also we have to shift from mineral fertilization to more and more organic fertilization, which means the waste of our home should, when they are organic, go back to the fields, which means that we cannot go on having regions growing animals and regions growing plants, because we need the waste of the animals to be put at a reasonable level as organic fertilizers into the field. So there is also this idea that we have to reorganize the way we produce and to find a better complementarity between animal and plant production. Finally, all those changes and possible investment that we'll have to do, or possible way that possible increase of the price, because it would be more costly to produce that. At the end of the day, with increase of health of people and durability of the systems, we will pay less. But it may be that when we put the credit card at the market, we'll pay a bit more on the short term. On the long term, we pay less if the soils are healthy and sustainable. Yet, we have the citizens to be aware of that. And that's why I wrote a book recently in French, which is called L'origine du monde, the origin of the world. It's a natural history of soils for those who are working on it. And I think we have to make more outreach. We have to put soils and origin of the food more in the curricula to have another generation that will not ignore that, in a way, even if we don't see it, we are living not on, but in and from soil. This generation will be more able to accept new rules, new methods, new kind of producing food that we may finally, thanks to the research I was suggesting at the beginning, that we may finally have in Europe and possibly worldwide.